So some of my favourite indie games, I guess, recently, I was a big fan of V, the Terry Kavanagh platformer from years ago, and Braid. A lot of those puzzle platformers, when the sort of that indie surge was happening originally, were great, and Super Meat Boy. They were all sort of real classics and really big profile games which grabbed a lot of attention, I think. I think recently there's been so much diversity that's been great as well. You've got great arcade racing games, which I'm really into, like Distance, but then I quite like a lot of the sort of narrative first-person games like Dear Esther as well. So I think the game I'm probably most proud of is one of my first games, which was a puzzle game called Captillo for mobile phones, for Android. And it taught me a lot, although it was quite a simple game. It taught me a lot about finishing a project, working all the way from a prototype up to releasing it and trying to market it, everything that's involved in making a game. That game was weirdly inspired by the Windows Solitaire win animation. I don't know if you remember that. When you finish the game, the cards sort of cascade down, but they leave the imprint of the card behind them, so you get these kind of weird trails. I think inspiration comes from different places. You know, every game is different, so some projects I'll play a game and I'll really like it, but I'll wish it had one thing changed, and so it's nice to be able to start a project and say, I'm going to change that, I'm going to improve this existing game, and particularly if it's an old game. I'm working on a racing game at the moment, and I'm really trying to take a lot of the inspiration from older racing games that I loved when I was a kid. So I think what I like about racing games is that sense of speed, that exhilaration. And I think what I want to try and do is to take some of that excitement, but to try and change some of the other aspects around the genre. So a lot of games you see are really grounded in reality. You know, you have a lot of sim racers, and it seems like the only alternative to that at the moment is kind of kart racers, and there's a bit of a gap in between where I think there's a lot of space to explore different structures, different themes. And I think when you're working with an established genre, you have to kind of decide whether you want to work within the genre and you want to produce something that's very much like by the rules of the genre, or if you're trying to like break the genre and sort of tear it apart, I suppose. I mean, that's a lot harder, the second one. It can be easier in a sense. If you're making something like a racing game, you have a lot of rules to follow, you have a lot of sort of tropes and guidelines that you want to go along with. So for me, it's more about trying to see where I can make a difference and really focus my effort to differentiate it in a few sort of key areas. But I don't want to reinvent everything, you know, I don't want to change the controls. I don't think there's a problem with most racing games, sort of controls